and good evening everyone. My name's Rebecca. I'm a member of the environment team with the Brahma Kumaris in Australia, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's program, Shaping Our Future Together. This program is dedicated to UN 75, the United Nations 75th anniversary, and also the United Nations International Day of Peace. Before I introduce our special guest, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, recognising their continuing connection to land, water and communities. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the program. Carolin Fraude is our special speaker tonight, and I'd like to share with you a little bit of information about Carolin. Carolin studied educational science, sociology, psychology and philosophy. She works at a Transdisciplinary Research Institute on Sustainability Science in Potsdam, Germany. In her work, Carolin designs, facilitates and researches reflective dialogue formats for various stakeholders at the UN climate change conferences. Since 1998, Carolin has practiced and taught Raja Yoga meditation with the Brahma Kumaris. She's coordinated meditation schools in Hamburg and Berlin. Since 2013, she's been part of Brahma Kumaris delegations to UN conferences at the Commission on the Status of Women and the United Nations Climate Change conferences. She's also part of the Brahma Kumaris Environment Initiative. Carolin's special interest lies in the interconnectedness of inner and outer transformation, how transforming and cultivating states of consciousness, attitudes and behaviours and lifestyles can help make the transition towards a sustainable society. In her talk tonight, Carolin is going to address two questions. What is still missing for effective global transformation towards a sustainable society? And how can an emerging understanding of quantum social change, mindset shifts, and ancient wisdom support our personal and collective power to better affect change for our environment? So I'd like to welcome Carolin. Carolin, we're so glad that you could join us tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rebecca, and everyone who has organized this series of events. And thank you for inviting me to contribute something to the occasion of this very special International Day of Peace of the United Nations. The title of this year's Day of Peace, Shaping Peace Together, as well as the title of this talk, Shaping Future Together, is in many ways very appropriate. The times we are in are unique, I would say. Transformation is a buzzword. Future is a big question mark. Where are we heading towards? And it's even a question about our general global civilization as human beings. Of course, I'm talking in the context of global challenges such as climate change. I'm, as Rebecca has introduced me, working as well as in my voluntary work with the Brahma Kumaris Environment Initiative, as well as with my professional work in research in connection with the UN climate change conferences. And I'm sure you must have heard an ongoing demand and also frustration that these huge, I think biggest UN conferences happening since 25 years have not been able to guide the way to action, to lead people into implementing what they have been working on for such a long time. And I would like to relate a little bit of scientific information here, even though it's not a scientific talk. But I think there is a lot out there which can help us to contextualize a bit more what the times are calling for. And then I will go also touch upon why inner transformation is so important and what meditation, for example, and other things can offer for that. So in this talk, I would connect to the topic of peace in the sense of a culture of peace and a culture of being and working together, and also being and living on this planet. There is a growing understanding that the problems and challenges we are facing today are different than many years ago, several years ago. They are quite complex and they are very much changing, and they change all the time. They are like very hard to predict. However, and many factors are involved. So to deal with them, for example, is not something which you can do with just one scientific discipline. For example, something connected to air quality, chemistry. But it needs really a knowledge of all scientific disciplines, as well as social science. However, even that has been understood that it's not enough, because we are aware we do have a lot of technical solutions. We do have an amazing amount of scientific knowledge measuring changes such as global temperature or global warming over many years. We have all of that and we know so much, and yet so little changes. So the question comes, why? And you're also aware we have the political frameworks for that with the Paris Agreement since COP22 or 21, I think. So that's already many years ago. And still, even that doesn't give us the strategic and effective road to action. So I would like to point here at something which started off already in the 70s with the Club of Rome, where scientists, politicians pointed out that the problems, they are sometimes called wicked problems because of their complexity, they are connected to a deeper level of aspects which we have to look at. And Donella Meadows has come up with this quite well-known model of the iceberg, where the top of the iceberg is visible, and we see the problems there. For example, a rise in temperature, a rising sea level, and on that level we also have been looking for solutions, changing transport systems and so on, and developing different systems, how we as a society can function in a more environmental friendly way. However, under the water of the iceberg. There is a huge part of the iceberg, the bigger part, and this is moving, and this is not being addressed. It's under the water. And Donella Meadows, at that time, she would describe the layers under the water with patterns of behavior, like patterns which are also coming from certain systems. So that is system structures, like how our society functions, how our financial systems function, the whole idea of growth, and all of these things come into play here. And the lowest or deepest level of the iceberg, she was talking about mental models. And here we are also looking at paradigms, like collective patterns of thinking, which are so powerful that they direct every new idea in a certain direction already, or allow us only to think in a certain context, in a certain frame, but not beyond that. My colleagues in the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in the project of A Mindset for the Anthropocene have developed this model further and defined this area of mental models in a more specific way. And the patterns and layers they are described here are, you can see that in the screen, are worldviews, ontologies, ethics. So ethics is actually the more conscious level, ethics, values. But then worldviews, how do we see the world? How do we see ourselves in relation to the world? For example, do I see the world as something like resources which I can use, like I go into a supermarket and I just buy certain things, or like mechanical? Or am I perceiving and am I aware that this is a very sensitive, very complex system, the natural world, which can be harmed by my actions, by the way I consume this world? It's a living system. And we have, I would say, lost this perception and this understanding of the living system being a sensitive one which we have to care for. Surely this is inheritance from industrialization, where everything, our whole lifestyles, our whole experience of life have become more and more production orientated and efficient. And somehow we lost touch with the nature of things, which their way of being and their nature. So the last level, ontologies, also goes into that direction, thinking patterns, consciousness. So this is more and more understood also by the public, or by I would say traditional scientists, that we need to include social aspects, but even aspects connected to consciousness and worldviews. And coming back to the wicked problems and the awareness that we need new forms of solutions, I would like to also mention that there is a area called Transdisciplinary Science, which is very, I would say, popular or growing area in environmental and sustainability science and work. And transdisciplinary science and knowledge looks at what is knowledge that is really transformative. And that includes transforming a certain limited understanding of science, I would say. For example, that we also agree to having values and being normative in that sense. Like traditionally, science always had to be very objective and neutral, which is actually not possible because every scientist has a certain worldview, has a certain value set. And so here we make this more aware and open, you can say. And the very fact that we want to protect our natural world and life is a value, is a certain direction. But also it acknowledges that different kinds of knowledge are important. For example, experience knowledge or process knowledge. How for example, can we work with very different groups of stakeholders who are involved in these complex issues? And I mentioned already scientists and politicians, but there are also people who are locally affected, who need to be involved, who have maybe a certain cultural heritage which does make it difficult for changing, for example, a traditional way of work. This is also connected to transformative knowledge, but also even knowledge and wisdom of indigenous communities. And here I would really like to point out and make us aware that actually they were much further ahead of us. They were very wise in dealing, in living and respecting and protecting the boundaries, the natural boundaries of the earth, and had a lot of understanding, had a lot of I would say heart connection. They were in a natural interaction. And here I also would like to point out the aspect of relationship, because I think that the way we live relationships, and then we can very much come to the human level where we all have our experiences, how relationships are sometimes very happy and enjoyable, but sometimes also very difficult, frustrating and even harmful. So these patterns behind this, behind the type of relationship, this is interesting, and this actually tells us even something in how we relate to the natural world, because I would even say that these are very similar patterns. And I would say the values or patterns are connected with things like respect, sensitivity, compassion, and a broader perspective of life, I would say, or with disconnection, having lost touch with the other person or with the natural world or with even myself, so that I don't realize how I become transgressive, how I kind of misuse my own self, my own body, the other person, the natural world, by taking more than the other can actually hold or have, to be still able function in its own boundaries and systematic way, healthy way. And an example on the physical body, we sometimes give our body far too little sleep or too much sleep, or far too much food or wrong food, unhealthy food. We use the body in a stressful way. We don't give it this relaxation which the cells need, or also our brain need, to be in a healthy state. And isn't it interesting that we can point out such behavior patterns with our own self, with our body, but also with other people, and even with the environment, and that there is a very clear connection we can make. So these different forms of knowledge are important today to be able to find solutions which are really leading us to a sustainable society and are not just on the first surface of the iceberg, and therefore not being able to make the shift, the transformative changes which really need to happen now. I mentioned already the term culture of being and working together, and here I would like to expand the perspective of relationships into a perspective of a culture of being together, because that again relates more to systems and how we structure our life, how we structure our, for example, an institution, modes of working in an institution, or how a city is organized. Where is the center of the city, and how is everyone relating and moving in the city, for example. All of this is connected to our way of relating and being together. Coming back to the climate change conferences, I would like to share that in Madrid last year during COP25, the UN Climate Change Conference 25, we had an experiment where we offered, this is from the ISS, the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, where we offered a space and invited everyone who was at that conference, from negotiators to scientists to NGO people, religious organizations. You have an amazing variety there, and invited them in a very unusual format for these COPs. Usually you would have talks and panel discussions, but we would have a room where we would sit in a circle and meet each other and talk to each other beyond our agendas, our roles, our even more and more beyond our national and cultural backgrounds. So we had designed certain processes to facilitate these kind of conversations, where a different kind of relationship, a different kind of connection could happen. It was very, very interesting to see what that has led to. And of course, we questioned the culture, the prevailing culture at these conferences. And I think it's not that different to other multilateral political fields. It's just one example, I would say. And then we researched this experiment, which was going over the course of 2 weeks, and published a paper in it. And I would just shortly read out to you some of the results. So there were 5 clusters of transformative skills which were identified. And I mentioned in the beginning that the conference often gets stuck and don't deliver what actually is so much needed, whilst the time is running out for climate change. So the question or the interest was, what kind of culture, what kind of consciousness and mindset do we need to cultivate for working together better, for coming to the core of our shared intention, and therefore being able to collaborate with each other rather than often being afraid of each other and trying to negotiate and hide and whose interests is getting through more or not. So what was becoming visible and was expressed in surveys and interviews was that an openness and self-awareness as well as reflection are important aspects or important transformative skills. And this would be the ability to meet situations, people and others, and one's own thoughts and feelings with openness, presence and acceptance. Another cluster is compassion and empathy, which is about the ability and the desire to see and meet oneself and others and the world with care, humility and integrity. Thirdly is perspective seeking and relationality, the ability to see and bring in more perspectives for broader relational understanding of oneself and others and the whole. And that very much reminds me on a specific form of dialogue which was invented by David Bohm. David Bohm was a physicist who, together with Einstein and some other, worked on laying the foundation of quantum physics, being aware that there are other forces, other patterns, other energies which work beyond the ones which we can measure with normal instruments like matter, also actually coming up with a completely different understanding of matter. But I don't want to go into quantum physics here, but just point out that coming from this hardcore science field, he actually came to an understanding of communication, which leads to understanding and on a I would say deeper or higher level. And I'm mentioning this here as it fits interestingly very well to the outcomes of our observations and research in this dialogue and reflection space. Bohm, when he talks about this form of dialogue, relates to an anthropologist who was again observing indigenous cultures, how they very regularly would come together, sit in a circle and talk with and listen to each other's perspectives and feelings. And it seemed to be very important that they wouldn't have an agenda, they wouldn't have something specific to negotiate or had even an aim, but they would just talk in a very trusting environment and atmosphere. So they would open themselves totally to the other. And then the anthropologist, observing their practice of conversations, observed that there was always a point where suddenly the dialogue stopped and everyone would exactly know what to do without planning or so, because it seemed to be so clear to everyone, and he didn't understand this point of concluding the dialogue. And having experimented with this method myself a lot in diverse groups, it's what's actually happening, and Bohm describes it also very beautifully, that when you hear each one's perspective in a very authentic way, your own perspective broadens and you get open and you see suddenly from much more angles, and it makes sense what other people see and say from their angle. And so it's you leave away this pattern of against and either this or that and come to an and including certain perspectives, because they seem to be also relevant. And I think these kind of thinking patterns is very important for us now to develop in our conversations and relationships, that we think more in a circular way rather than A to B and this is the root, because we can be so limited in our thinking, and there seems to be a strong pattern of excluding certain subcultures, certain people, and build divisions. That's what we can see in today's world, and it's fear-driven. It's defending your own values or view, instead of seeing different forms of cultures and worldviews as an enrichment. So here we can also point out that it's actually these questions which arise from all I've shared are very connected to ethical and spiritual themes and practices. Because who really has experienced with consciousness change or mindset change? Who practices awareness? It's not the traditional areas of who would make policies. It's not these actors in these fields of science, even though they work a lot of with new knowledge. But this inner part of change and transformation, which you cannot nail down like empirical knowledge, is actually the crucial leverage point for change now, or one of the very crucial ones. So here we can get more and more to practices like meditation. And one more word to the dialogue format. It has a lot of a lot to do with meditation, because you come into this observer attitude. You get yourself out of the center and become an observer of a bigger picture. And this is one of the outcomes also, like openness, self-awareness, reflection, perspective seeking, is a skill we all need to learn and practice much more, because that allows us to connect and stay connected with the other and find bridges, build bridges and find solutions. Open our own mind, see more, instead of having quickly a certain opinion, because in every opinion there are beliefs, there are assumptions, but we usually are not aware of them. We don't reflect them. And reflection is something which you practice in dialogue, but you also very specifically practice these in meditation, or let's say in Raj Yoga meditation, which I'm practicing. The ability to stop your mind, your general mode of doing and thinking and being, pause, go inside, focus, and become the observer. Relax. And it's very connected with peace, because when your mind is in peace and you're listening, you're observing, then you have a much better ability to connect to your inner wisdom, to all the treasures which we actually have as beings. And we just lost touch with it. And unfortunately, the systems which we have created are also not very supportive to us to get and stay in touch with these treasures inside of us, like values, virtues, but also wisdom, really a deep knowledge. And so we have to also be aware of the systems and cultures which we need to transform. And that can be in our very direct, immediate family, in our circle of friends, and our colleague circle, the people we work with. Can we start cultivating a different mode of work, a different mode of communication, of sense making? Can we say, I don't know, let's consider, let's talk about it, and instead of just jumping to an opinion, for example, because we lose a lot of very valuable insights maybe by having an opinion already about something, without having created this space of contemplation, of meditation, of dialogue and reflection. Interesting is also that in transformative science, the aspect of reflectivity is being described more and more by some pioneers as a crucial part of transformation and transformative science. Even because of what I mentioned already earlier, we all have a certain view, a certain mindset, a certain understanding, but we need to make ourselves aware of it, but also make it transparent to others. So at this point, I would like to mention that I would like to come back to peace, because maybe the connection to peace is not enough clear here. Of course, if we are transgressive to our environment, have relationships which are not healthy, that's peaceless, that can be even violent. But I would like to look deeper into it. It's really reconnecting with in the Brahma Kumaris, we have a very clear picture about the self, who am I? And we understand ourselves as beings who are beings of peace, actually. And the very fact that I would say we all long for peace and harmony is that it is something which belongs to us. It's something which is part of me. So that's why I'm missing and when it's not there, when I can't feel it. But it's not that I have totally lost it. I might just have become disconnected from that part of me. So let me get back to that original quality, focus on that and give space to it, appreciate it, and also recognizing it as a power which protects me and which uplifts me also. So that can be one very, very powerful practice to start with, especially now that the International Day of Peace. I would say that's it's a beautiful occasion to really look at this quality and how I can cultivate this towards myself, towards my physical body, towards other people, towards the work I'm doing, to animals, to all forms of life in the way I consume. Can I do that with mindfulness, with awareness and peace? I would like to briefly touch upon one other emerging theory, quantum social change, which is very much developed at the moment by a few scientists, and specifically by Carolin. And this uses metaphors of quantum physics and describes social change processes. And it has a huge emphasis also on how much one person, one individual matters. Because very often in this world we can feel it's so complex, it's so big, and it's running so fast in a unhealthy direction. How can I, as one person, make a difference? And this theory very much argues for the immense power one individual has in their ability to make a difference and to change something. And this is connected to the understandings of quantum physics. And very briefly, in quantum physics, you acknowledge that everything is connected. Like, I'm sitting here in Berlin, I'm talking in a room, and actually no one hears me. But okay, you hear me on through the internet. But even if you wouldn't hear me, whatever I do and think, we are connected with our thoughts, and thoughts are energy. It's not that in quantum physics that space is empty, but it's full of connections and energy. And this exchange is making a difference. And this is actually also what is a paradigm. Like, a set of ways of thinking can be so powerful. And so even though you don't have much exchange, you also start to think in a certain direction. That's when you are unconscious. But becoming more and more conscious and reflecting and observing your mind, reflecting about certain aspects and connections, allows us to change our thinking, change our worldview, change our understanding of ourselves and life in general. So these changes are having an immense effect, because imagine a complex systems with different dots all being connected, like synapses in the brain, for example, and they all function in different rhythms. And now one little entity starts to change, and because it's connected with so many different other entities, it definitely influences the whole system. And now imagine that we are a community, a growing community of people who start to think deeply and question what we are doing, question the prevailing systems, and start to act upon different understandings and qualities. Our choices start to be made on the basis of a different set of values and also priorities. So that definitely affects the system, especially as we are growing in number. Those people who really understand that some changes need to happen very quickly. Another aspect of quantum social change is the understanding of fractals. And fractals are described as self-similar patterns which repeat itself. You find them a lot in nature. Like, there are these beautiful pictures of a flower, or of a structure of the cocoon of a honey, what honeybees produce. These patterns you can see here, that they repeat themselves. You find them in many different, even in a tree, in a leaf. You have certain forms which are repeating itself. And on a less physical level, or in a different energy level, these patterns are also there in our thinking. And let's say we together start to think in a new way, start to see the environment in a new way, start to see life in a new way, have different values, priorities. And this theory of fractals says that when we start to think in new patterns, in new directions, that also multiplies and has like a different dynamic in its own. It repeats, and it kind of inspires others and allows others to think in a certain way as well. There has always been a thought pioneer, someone who for the first time, for example, expresses something. There have been thoughts before, of course, also probably from different people, but then one person expresses it and makes it concrete, and then it will be, you know, fought and so on. So that's how new paradigms emerge. And then more people think about it and they suddenly see it relevant. And finally, after some time, this becomes the new normal, the new pattern. And using the word new normal, we also always now think of our just new experience with the COVID-19 crisis. How in a very short amount of time, in all corners of the world, very similar new structures have been created. People everywhere run around with face masks and practice social distancing. So we can see how quick things can change, which otherwise would have been so difficult. But something becomes like a means for change, a reason for change. Okay, coming back to these fractals, it just means that once you put something into practice, your reflections and your observations and your new understanding becomes becomes expressed in your actions, in your choices, in the way you relate to others. This becomes a pattern. First of all, spiritually speaking, it becomes a pattern in your mind, in your soul, in your inner structure. Your memory starts to reproduce this pattern, and so it becomes like a very strong form or way of being and doing after some time. But even on a systemic level, and that's what Fractals is talking about as well. You start acting in a certain way, and other people start acting in a certain way. It creates suddenly institutions, structures, cities, you can say, are functioning different suddenly with different priorities, with different values. So I would like to conclude here with the importance of the values and understandings that guide our thinking, our doing and being, and all of our choices. If we get this right, then we are actually at the core of the problem. We are transforming the seed of the problem, and we can really create a new society. Looking at very fundamental guidelines, I would say, is this aspect of not taking from anything which is temporary, and that's nearly everything, but using and connecting with the resources which are eternally inside of me. So let me make use of these, my inner peace, my inner love, my purity, my truth, all of these beautiful energies and powers which we can experience once we turn inside, we reconnect and give space to it so that we can feel it, experience it, and grow the level of this energy and expand. If we observe ourselves, what we do when we feel unhappy, a very big pattern is consumption. We go and shop and buy something. eat something or consume some kind of entertainment. That's taking from outside. Sometimes some is less harmful, some things are more harmful, of course, but like drugs or so. But actually, it's all at this point in time where we are in such challenging, difficult times. It's so clear we have to have a radical shift, and we have to work with the seed of the problem, and that's this aspect of taking from temporary sources, filling ourselves. Because why is it problematic? It makes us dependent, and it actually doesn't fulfill the real need we have. So we have the opportunity now to learn about spiritual sources, such as the qualities which I have mentioned already, which are inside. But we further have the possibility to connect with another source, a spiritual source of energy, which we call the ocean of peace, the ocean of love, the ocean of truth and harmony. For many people, it's God, and it's God for me as well, and for Raj yogis. But you can just try and experiment with this idea and to connect with a higher source which is beyond the material world, which is constant, eternal, which is also a living being and sending out very, very pure, benevolent energy and powers. And that's actually a huge advantage, and actually an amazing solution to start nurturing myself from that source, filling myself with that love, with divine power, so that I'm able to let go more and more of limited temporary sources to fill myself. And so I can suddenly stay happy without consuming so much and consume less and less. I can live a simpler life, don't need to fly here and there all the time, or buy things all the time. I don't need. I'm content and fulfilled by learning to fill myself with these beautiful energies and connect to my own inner resources as well, and then also share them with others. If I want to, we are benevolent people. We feel it when other people are not happy, so we give our time and words and company. But even there, let's practice to not give of our own limited self, but let's connect with the higher source and allow this energy to go through us and share with the others, so that they are also connected to a source which is actually endless, and not only to me as an individual person. Yeah. So I would like to offer a little meditation at this point and invite you to connect with these eternal sources, and see how you can bring these energies into your life, into your relationships, into your context you're working and operating. You can try to leave your eyes open if you want, as this is the way we practice meditation in the Raj Yoga way. But if it's too distracting, you can also close them a little bit, and just it's about focusing yourself and lay your vision on some spot, so you can start to tune and turn inside gently. I breathe deeply and relax my own physical body. Having learned a lot, I relax my mind now and let go of thoughts more and more. And just perceive how I feel right now. After hearing all of this, with what feelings am I left with? And it may be very different feelings, and that's okay. I accept, I acknowledge. I want to now turn into my inner self, the core of my being. I become aware that I am a being of light, of energy. I am a conscious being. I visualize myself as a point of light, sitting behind the eyes, in the middle of my head. My attention, my focus zooms inside so that I experience myself sitting right behind my eyes. I stay totally relaxed whilst doing that. Sitting here, I become aware of the world around me from this perspective. From the perspective of being inside myself. I connect with my inner quality of peace. I feel peace. I breathe peace. I imagine how waves of peace flow through my body and further to the atmosphere, to other people and the environment. Going inside again and feeling the essence of peace, silence. I become aware of the power which lies in peace. An energy that harmonizes, synchronizes. An energy that brings order and a healthy rhythm of life. peace connected with dignity allows me to respect my own boundaries and care for my inner balance. I learn to perceive the needs and the boundaries of my physical body. Respect those and care. When I share peace as my way of life with everyone I come in contact with, share the flavor of this beautiful vibration. Share this uplifting vibration. It's an expression of respect, of love, of power. Connecting with the higher source of peace, the divine. I can become an instrument to feed the complex global system with an immense, beautiful energy, the energy of peace, taking from the divine source, which is endless and constant, allowing this energy to flow through me into life, into the society I'm part of. I can visualize how this constant flow has an amazing impact. My actions materialize this energy and have an even stronger impact. So I create new patterns, a new culture, the culture of peace. I'm able to connect with the peace in others. And I become someone who supports the peace in others. Shaping future together is very much about contributing to a new culture, to a new society, which is based on peace, harmony, respect, compassion, and also courage. Courage to stand for new or different values than the dominant ones. I realize my own capacity for agency, how much I matter, how much my actions, my relationships, my thoughts matter. So let's be very aware, courageous, and hopeful that we can make a difference. That's actually our task, to create a new, peaceful, sustainable society, who has learned again to live in harmony with the environment, with the ecological system, with the living system. Thank you, and Om Shanti. Greetings of peace, and a very, very wonderful day of peace tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolin. That was wonderful. Okay, so thank you to all of you who have been watching the program tonight. We hope that you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to know more about the Brahma Kumaris, you can visit our website, brahmakumaris.org.au. If you'd like to know more about our Environment Initiative, you can visit eco.brahmakumaris.org. So thank you once again for joining us, and good evening.